Good morning, everybody. MG here. MGCovers bringing you a brand new sports handicapping video. Title of this video is Why the NBA is Extremely Difficult to Handicap. Great video, great educational video. Before we dive into that, want to say thank you to the sports betting, sports handicapping community. We went over 1,000 subs. I greatly appreciate that. Wish I could thank everybody. Might not be a big deal to you, but it is a big deal to me. One of my goals was to get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, so we did it. So, hey, I greatly appreciate that. I'll continue to pump out good content, or at least try to always pump out really good content. And so, as promised, I've been giving away my power rankings and all my plays on my Instagram. So, if you follow me on Instagram, MGCovers, let's go to that real quick so you can see it. Cover spelled with a Z. And if you go there right here with a post, I'll give out my power rankings. You'll see all the lines for all the sports. And then my plays I'll give out on my story. And generally, it's right before, pretty close to tip off, maybe 10 to 15 minutes before the game. So you'll get access to, you'll be able to see all my plays, and we'll probably do this for the entire rest of the week. So again, can't thank you guys enough. Let's dive into the video, why the NBA is an extremely difficult sport to handicap. And what you see right here, these are results from yesterday for, actually I have the wrong date here, 10/12/27, and results from covers.com. And these are my actually power rankings here from yesterday, my lines. So here is the deal. The reason NBA is difficult to handicap, reason why I don't like handicapping NBA, all you do every single day if you handicap the NBA is you're checking for injuries, players that are sitting, etc. And this is even before COVID. So that presents a very difficult task because let's say a team is missing two of their star players. How do you statistically quantify that? Meaning, if how many points would that be worth? Because what you're looking at here, this is my stat model. This is 100%, and I think there's a lack of. I just made a video about that. There's a extreme lack of education and understanding in our business. So I'm going to put a big emphasis on that this year. Is just really breaking this thing down and giving people just really good education, because I don't think people understand it. So the stat model, the reason we have the stat model is to create a non-biased line. This line over here at the sports book, this line is a biased line. The line that you see at the sports book is based on the public's perception of a team. If the public perceives a team to be really good, then the sports books will adjust that line accordingly. Case in point, you look at the Lakers. Lakers are 12-20 against the spread. The public, quote, perceives them to be a good team. In reality, they're not, especially when it comes to against the spread. You look at the Detroit Lions in NFL. The Detroit Lions are perceived to be a really bad team, so the sports books compensate for that in the line. And guess what? Detroit Lions are 10-5 against the spread this year. So don't forget that. That's the reason why you want to have this model over here. The model is statistically driven with no bias in it. And the problem is when you have injuries in NBA, again, how do you factor that? How do you statistically quantify an injury, or if half the team is missing, et cetera, et cetera? Well, the answer is you can't. You can't statistically quantify an injury. So more times than not, it's simply a pass. So the line, and this is very important, those of you build models, had questions about this one yesterday. You got Chicago, Atlanta. My line was Atlanta -7. Both teams had some injuries there. So, again, how do you factor that? Well, you don't, because you never adjust this line. Because if I was to say, okay, my line is -7, if they're missing Trae Young, okay, they're missing Trae Young, I'm going to make this line -4. What have I done then? I have created a biased line. It's not statistically driven. That is my opinion of his impact on the line. So then what I would be doing, if I did adjust the line, now I have a biased line compared against a biased line. It's just, there's no accuracy in that. So how you do this on a professional level is you never change your model. Your model will always be statistically driven, and then you simply handicap the injuries situationally. So if it looks like, hey, there's a lot of injuries, it's very difficult to handicap that, it would simply be a pass. And there'll be more times than not when you see that, that would be my recommendation is to simply pass, because again, it creates a lot of doubt. I learned that from Bob McHugh, my mentor, is that, if there's too many factors that's taken away from this model, then it's best to pass. So let's look at situations to where, and just sort of compare this, like the way that I teach handicapping. Generally, for the most part, you want to play favorites via my line. So like, for instance, Charlotte, my line was -2, Sportsbook was -8. More times than not, if they're a favorite my line and then they're a favorite at the Sportsbooks, high probability that team is going to win. And that was the case here, where you see, we had Houston +2, even though there's value on that line, still wouldn't recommend that play. And of course, the game I just talked about, Chicago, Atlanta, both sides had injuries. I think Ball did not play for Chicago, right? Again, I don't follow NBA that close. But when you look at, and so a lot of times you can sort of, look at line movement. Let's take a look at that. And I don't have the preferred book that I use for line movement, but you can see here that the line moved, maybe this was a public line move. And if you don't know what a public line move is, that means when the general public is conscious of an injury, everybody knows, hey, this person's out, and so the line moves accordingly to that injury. But the line movement itself favored Atlanta. I don't know if that was a line move, a public line move, because Ball was not playing. Not sure. Again, I don't follow it close enough to know who was starting, who wasn't. But line movement actually favored Atlanta in this one, and of course they lost. All right, so let's look at a good example. You see here, Boston, Minnesota. In my model, just so you know, it uses stats from the last 5 games. I found that to be the best way to do it. So if a player, and again, another reason why NBA is difficult. So if you have, some of Boston's really good players haven't played in the last 5 games, those stats will not show up in that line. Okay. All right. So you look at this Boston game here. You had Boston -1.5, Minnesota +1.5, and again, I said, hey, we generally don't play unless, if we generally don't play a team unless they're favorite. But at 1.5, pretty even. And then we take a look at this line here. It was Boston -5. We had Minnesota +5. So that was a little bit closer than the 8 we saw here with Charlotte. And then if we take a look at line movement here, you'll see this movement. Let's go down and look at Bet365. Yeah, this movement actually favored overall. Again, I don't check the line movement at Bet365, but just so you can see it, it was 8.5 and ended up closing at 5. And then, of course, I would recommend playing, in that particular example, playing Minnesota if you did on the money line, because the +5, the average margin of victory in NBA is 11 points. So unless you're getting close to that, it would be advantageous to simply play that game on the money line. And Minnesota was +170. That would have been a good win on the money line. All right, let's sort of continue to go through this. Utah, San Antonio. Again, this is kind of what we want to see. A classic example of a game, and this Utah-San Antonio game would have been a better example than the Boston and even that Houston-Charlotte game, because you can see here we clearly have a favorite via our line, -5.5 Utah, and they're actually an underdog at the sportsbook. They were +7. And again, same type deal. That's getting in that questionable range. When it gets close to 11, do you play it on the money line? Do you take the points? I would say if they're a favorite, my line, and like I've talked about before, if you win 50% of your underdog money line games, you'll be profitable long term. So you might lose one that you play +170. Let's say if you just played those 2 games I mentioned, Minnesota, San Antonio. So you lose the Minnesota one, that was +70, and then you turn around and win the Utah game. That would be, let's see what the money line was for this one. That was +2. Actually, they got it wrong here. Whoops. Let's see. And Minnesota was +170. Whoops, did I do the wrong one? No, I was wanting to look at Utah. My bad, y'all. No, wait a minute. Utah was the favorite. My bad on that one. So that one was actually... Whoops, I messed that one up, y'all. Totally disregard that. I just got confused. All right, it was a Memphis game I was wanting to focus on. I kind of wrote down some notes. My bad. So just completely ignore that one. My bad. So you see Utah was minus 5.5. The line was Utah minus 7.5, so there's no value in that line. So that would have been a no play. And that's a good point to make while we're at this game. I had it at minus 5.5. The sportsbook had it at minus 7.5. So there's no value. And of course, they did not cover. San Antonio covered that one by 1. All right, Memphis, Phoenix. This is a better example. What I was talking about. Memphis minus 7.5. Sportsbook line had them at plus 7.5. So we get a 15-point differential here. Let's take a look at line movement. And again, I'm not checking injuries or anything. You can see that line movement did in fact favor Memphis overall. I'm not sure what it looks like at the actual book that I use for line movement, but you can see here 8 got up to 9, and this just shows different time stamps, but late 8.5 at 2, then it ends up closing at 7.5. So just looking at this, that would favor Memphis there, and of course they won. Let's see what they would have been on the money line. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. Boom, nice hit there at plus 265. And again, I don't know if they had injuries or what, but I'm just sort of going through this. Dallas, Portland, even game via my line. Dallas ended up winning that one. So again, that would definitely be one that if you played, you play on the money line. It was a plus 3. I mean, you only had a 3-point differential there. Let's see if line movement favored them. It actually went against them. 1.5 closed out at 3, so that probably would have been in the real time. You would have probably passed on that one. And then let's take a look at this Brooklyn Clippers. We had Brooklyn plus 1.5, Clippers minus 1.5. So really close game here. So really not a lot of value. So that more than likely would have been a pass. We'll take a look at line movement. Yep, and actually favored the Clippers there at close. So anyway, so the big takeaway is, when you're handicapping NBA, if you're using my lines or if you have your own statistical model, that's a really good model. Again, you don't ever change the model. And if you see a game where there's a ton of injuries, then more than the best way, my recommendation, the smartest way to do that would be to simply just pass. Now, it could be a situation where it's a public line move. And what I mean by that is, let's say, a star player's missing and the public, there's a video, if you back up on my YouTube channel, about a public line move where everybody knows about that injury and the public sort of overcompensates for that, overreacts to that, and there may actually be value in playing the team that has the injury or the star player that's missing. So anyway, if you decide to wager on NBA, it's going to be a constant grind as far as injuries. Now, you may enjoy that. You may enjoy watching the NBA. I'm just saying for me personally, I don't, but that is something that you're going to have to do daily. Checking lineups, starters, going to Twitter. That's another good tip. You can go to, just look for a beat writer. You type in Houston beat writer, Houston Rockets beat writer, and that guy will generally... It'll pop up on Twitter. Go to Twitter, and you can see who's out for the game. So you always want to check lineups even before you place that wager. Maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes before, just to make sure there's nobody missing, because you don't want to get play that game early, find out a guy's missing. So always a grind with injuries, and that's what makes it difficult. Hope that video helps. And again, if you want to get access to all my lines, including NBA for today, again, follow me on Instagram, MGCovers, and I'll give out all my plays on my storyline. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.